In addition to serving as the Dean of the Rutgers School of Dental Medicine, Dr. Feldman also represents ADEA on the Coalition for Modernizing Dental Licensure. Dr. Feldman's going to get us started today by providing a brief overview of the coalition and the work that they do. And after that, Matt will talk to us about the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Licensure Compact. The National Center for Interstate Compacts, where Matt works, has drafted model legislation that serves as the basis for the compact. As many of you likely know by now, Iowa became the first state to sign the compact into law on April 27th, and Washington became the second state on May 4th. The compact has also been sent to the governor's office in Tennessee and was introduced in Kansas, Ohio, Minnesota, and Texas. And with that, I'll turn things over to Dr. Feldman. Thanks.
Great. So thank you very much. I'm actually going to share my screen, so just give me a second to get that going. Hopefully you can see it now. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to give a very brief overview about the coalition. It's called the Coalition for Modernizing Dental Licensure. We started several years ago working on trying to look at how dental licensure is done and how to bring it up to current standards. And I'm very happy to report that change is actually happening. So the work is paying off. So the mission of the coalition is to ensure patient safety, increase access to care, and promote professional mobility by modernizing the licensure process. We have two major goals. One revolves around initial licensure and the other revolves around portability. So once you do have a license, your ability to move. And so the two goals are, one, to achieve adoption of a valid and reliable examination for dental and dental hygiene licensure that does not include the use of single encounter procedure-based examinations on patients as part of the licensure examination. And I just want to point out that this is now about both the dental and dental hygiene licensure. And then the second goal is to achieve portability of dental and dental hygiene licensure among all licensing jurisdictions in the United States for the benefit of the public and the profession. Right? And so our policy statement regarding initial licensure reads like this. The Coalition for Modernizing Dental Licensure advocates for the acceptance of all valid and reliable examinations for dental and dental hygiene initial licensure that does not involve the use of single encounter procedure-based examination on patients. And the policy statement with regard to portability reads, the Coalition for Modernizing Dental Licensure advocates for licensure portability for licensed dentists and dental hygienists. Licensing jurisdictions are strongly encouraged to, one, accept all available examinations and licensure pathways, and we're going to talk about the pathways in a moment. Two, identify a common core of requirements for licensure by credentials. And three, support licensure compacts among states. And you're going to hear more about the licensure compacts and where we are in process from that a little bit later on. All right. So who is the coalition? The coalition right now is made up of 122 different organizations, ranging from dental schools to dental associations and other types of dental and nonprofit organizations. All right. You'll note that there are no individuals that are members of the coalition. It is only organizations that could become either a member or supporter of the coalition. And you can see from this pie chart what the makeup of the coalition is right now, and right now translates into as of February 20th, 2023 of this year. Right. There are two levels of membership. One is actually referred to as members, and members actually inform at the development of strategy and actively participate in the advocacy efforts of the coalition. And then we have supporters, and supporters are those that lend their name to the activities of the coalition. So they may sign a letter of support, that type of thing. Membership and supportership, and I don't think supportership is a formal word, but I think you know what I mean. Membership and supportership is limited to organizations and agencies, not individuals. There is no cost to join the coalition, and both members and supporters have access to the coalition's tools and resources that help do the advocacy work. Members and supporters also help keep the coalition informed of their organization's related activities, and they help with the dissemination of information in both directions. So that's both between the coalition and their organization, and between their organization back to the coalition. Right? This just shows you to date what's happening in the licensure arena, and you'll notice that 47 states now accept the mannequin exam that is very, very different from what was going on just 5 years ago. There's no question that the COVID pandemic helped move that along. But most states, the vast majority of the states now accept a non-patient based licensure exam. Most of them doing it on a permanent basis, but we still have one or two that are doing it, only allow it on a temporary basis. And we're trying to move that to permanent status. We've got 29 states that accept all 3 regional exams. And again, we're trying to get portability to occur. So we would like all states to accept all different kinds of exams and different ways to licensure. All right. Currently, one of the pathways to licensure is through a PGY1, doing a residency program. And you can see that 9 states do accept that pathway to licensure right now. Though Delaware is a little quirky. Delaware, you need to do a PGY1 and do a state exam. But for all of the others, the PGY1 pathway is sufficient. Everyone, I believe, is familiar that there is work that is being done to develop and implement a dental licensure OSCE. The dental one is actually up and running, and there's a number of states that actually allow the fulfilling of the exam requirements by the DL OSCE exam. And the dental hygiene licensure OSCE exam is in development right now with a planned launch in 2024. Right. And last, there's work that's continuing that's being done in the area of looking at the possibility of a portfolio or compendium as a pathway for licensure. This would be work that students document in a rigorous way that could be used to show evidence that somebody is competent clinically. Right now, ADEA has an EPA work group. EPAs stand for Entrustable Professional Activities. This is used in the medical realm, particularly with regard to residency training, with regard to the residents being able to show that they are competent in doing the kinds of things that they need to do. And we're looking at how that could possibly feed into the compendium work. So this is still a work in progress. There are lots of resources that the coalition has that folks can use in their advocacy efforts. And you can see that list over on the right. I want to point out that there's a licensure map that both the coalition has, and there's another one that ADEA has, a very similar map, which provides an overview with regard to licensure requirements by state. And you can actually delve into or dive into licensure requirements by state by clicking on the state icon or letters. All right, but these are the kinds of resources that are available to individuals that are either members or supporters of the coalition. All right. Our landscape is continuing to change. There are now several alternatives that allow a very comprehensive discussion with state boards with regard to alternative ways to be able to demonstrate a potential licensee's competence. There is much greater emphasis on portability, and that's why the Dental Compact is coming about, and you'll hear about that in a couple of minutes. And there are legislative changes that are occurring across the country, and just trying to keep up with these legislative changes can be a real challenge. All right. And so if you want any more information about the coalition, please contact us. This is our website, our email, and there's a QR code if you want to scan that. All right. So this is where I'm going to end, and I'm going to hand this over to Mike now. I'm sorry, to Matt, who's going to talk about the compact.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Feldman, and thank you for all of our ADEA members who could make it out today, and for ADEA and extending the invitation to CSG to come and talk about the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact. So just give me 1 second here while I pull up some slides. All right, so my name is Matt Schaefer. I'm with the Council of State Governments and excited to be talking about this topic today of the licensure compact for dentists and dental hygienists. So you've probably never heard of the Council of State Governments. We are a membership organization for elected and appointed state government officials. We represent all 3 branches. So we work with the legislative branch, the executive, and the judiciary, and we do a lot of convening of our members together to learn one another, share best practices. We do policy research all around this idea of advancing excellence in state government. One of the programs that we have at CSG is the National Center for Interstate Compacts, which was established about 20 years ago, and we're the nation's only technical assistance provider around the creation, enactment, and revision of interstate compacts. So these things have been around for a long time, hundreds of years since our country was founded, and CSG has been in this space working, helping states develop and enact interstate compacts for quite a long time. So we do have a bit of a monopoly on this policy area. There's not really other groups out there working on interstate compacts. We've been involved in all of the licensure compacts that exist, and I'll share a list of those on a later slide. Okay, so what are we talking about when we use this term interstate compact? And what we're talking about here is a legal, legislatively enacted contract between two or more states. So I think the keys to emphasize here are that it's a legal contract. This is a legal binding agreement between two states, two or more states. And this contract is enacted by the legislature. So that is the decision point that essentially signs your state up to participate in the compact. It's an act of your state legislature. So that's a common question we get is, how does my state join the compact? Your state legislature has to pass model legislation, essentially, that mirrors all of the other states that are in the compact, saying we agree to this certain set of parameters, whatever the compact is about. And we've seen compacts be used to address a variety of different issues at the state level. The most common example that we often point to is your driver's license. So rather than the federal government coming in and saying, states, you need to recognize each other's driver's licenses, states came together, formed an interstate compact that allows you to have one driver's license issued by your home state of residence, but you're allowed to drive in any other state in the country. While you're there in another state where you don't have a driver's license, you still have to obey the laws and rules of that state wherever you are, but your license is issued by your home state. And that's really at a very high level how these occupational licensing compacts work. The whole purpose is I no longer have to maintain multiple licenses. I maintain one license, and I have access to practice in all of these other states that are a part of the compact. So we've seen in the last 10 years or so an explosion of interest in professions and in states using this tool, interstate compacts, to solve the issue of licensure portability. And like I mentioned on the previous slide, really the primary issue that we're trying to solve here is multi-state practice. How do we make it easier for people to work in multiple states without having to navigate the licensure process in each individual state in which they want to work? Also, how do we make it easier for people who are mobile, who want to move often, like the military spouse example that is often cited, where you're moving every 1 or 2 years? That's very burdensome to have to go through the licensure process that often. And so compacts make that easier, getting licensed in a new state when you move and practicing in multiple states at one time. Compacts maintain or improve public health and safety. This is largely due to the amount of information sharing that occurs amongst the member states. All the member states are required to share disciplinary actions, any pending investigations, anything like that. So there's really no scenario where a bad actor could hop from state to state undetected, because the member states are constantly communicating with one another about who's practicing in their state. And then lastly, preserving authority over professional licensing. So the compact allows for a pathway for a dentist or dental hygienist to practice in another state where they do not hold the license. But while the licensee is there, they have to abide by all of the laws and rules and regulations where the person is practicing, regardless of whether or not they have a license there. So just for example, I'm licensed in my home state of Kentucky. I want to work across the border in the state of Tennessee. While I'm in Tennessee, I've got to obey all of Tennessee's laws and rules, their Dental Practice Act. I have to obey everything that is in that that Dental Practice Act I'm subject to. And so in that sense, the state does retain authority over professional licensing. Tennessee still gets to say, here's what we define as dentistry and dental hygiene services. Here's what we set out for our initial licensure requirements. The state retains all of that. This is just a optional alternative pathway for people who want to be mobile or want to work in multiple states at one time. And you can see the statistics here at the bottom of this slide, the number of states that have adopted these. Almost all states have adopted at least one, and many states have adopted 5 or more. You can see 262 pieces of legislation just in the past 7 years, and then 15 professions that have these for occupational licensing portability. You can see the list here. Nursing and medicine lead the way. Nursing 40 states, medicine 39 states. Those are the oldest. Those were the first 2 out the gate in 2015. And then psychology, PT closely behind. The ones on the right side of your screen there, teaching, APRN, cosmetology, dentistry and dental hygiene, these are all brand new, just finished up this year. And so that's really the only reason why their membership is a little bit lower, is just because they've only been out to the states for a few months. So it's actually a pretty positive sign that we've seen some states start to enact these when they've really been only out to the states for a few months. Okay, here's a little heat map about where these things are most popular. So interesting to note, New York and California, a few states up there in the Northeast haven't passed any of these compacts yet. They're very popular in the Midwest and Southeast, as you can see. And so there's a variety of reasons for why that is. And I can get into that during the Q&A if anybody is particularly interested. But I always like to just kind of show state by state where these things are most popular. Okay, now we're going to get into the specifics of the dentist and dental hygienist compact. And before we do, I just wanted to outline a few of the commonly used terms. If you look at the compact itself, these terms are important for you to know and understand. So the first one is participating state. That just means any state that has enacted the compact, a state that's a member of the compact. A qualifying license is an active and unencumbered license issued by a participating state. A remote state is a state in which is a participating state. They're in the compact, but where the licensee doesn't hold a license, and they're seeking to practice via what we call a compact privilege. That's the next term on here. Compact privilege is just legal authorization granted to practice in a remote state. So it's not a license. It's just basically a green stamp that you meet the qualifications of the compact and you're able to practice in remote states. And lastly, the commission. You'll hear this term a lot as we go through this presentation, but the commission is the governing agency that oversees and administers the compact in the long run. So CSG was involved in drafting the model legislation, but our role, we take a step back once the commission is formed, and the commission is just made up of all of the member states. So right now, there's 2 states that have enacted it. Once we hit 7 states, that's what triggers the activation of this commission, and those 7 states will make up the initial commission. So Iowa will have a seat, Washington State will have a seat, and then the other 5 states that pass the compact will make up the initial commission. They'll write the rules and the bylaws that govern the compact in the long term. So this is an important concept to understand. It's not as if the commission is going to be writing rules to change licensing requirements in the state. They're really very narrowly, their rulemaking authority is very narrowly tailored to just administering the compact, making sure that it's functioning properly. Okay, so how does it actually work? The dentist or dental hygienist holds an active, unencumbered license in a state that's in the compact. The dentist or hygienist applies for what we call the compact privilege. Practitioner undergoes a background check. If nothing is found in the background check, the application is reviewed, their eligibility is verified. Practitioner pays any required fees, completes jurisprudence requirement, and then that privilege is issued. So this is how the practitioner gets their initial compact privilege, but once this process is done one time, the process after that, there's no repeating all of these steps. They're essentially, they've made it onto the good list and they can get compact privileges in the matter of minutes going forward. So it seems like this process might not be too different from getting a license, but it is faster. And once this is done initially, the process for getting multiple privileges afterwards is very expedited. And the PT Compact has on their website that they can issue a compact privilege in 10 minutes. So we're talking about moving into a system where you could get access to practicing in multiple states at one time in a matter of 10 minutes rather than waiting on a licensing board for weeks or months potentially. Okay, so the compact is a lengthy document. I want to just focus on a couple of the articles here that are most pertinent to dentistry and dental hygiene. I'll just briefly cover all of these other sections, but if you look at the compact itself, it's lengthy. It's about 25 pages, but these are the areas in which I'd encourage everyone here to focus on. So this is section 3 of the compact, which is basically outlines what the state has to have in place in order to be eligible to join. So number 1, the state has to require for licensure the national board exam. Number 2, they have to require CODA accredited education. And we do specify in the compact that it is pre-doctoral dental education leading to DDS or DMD. So something like a CODA accredited residency would not satisfy this requirement. It would need to be a pre-doctoral dental education program. And then number 3, successful completion of a clinical assessment. And this gets back to the comments that Dr. Feldman made about the coalition in their perspective on examinations. The way we drafted our definition for clinical assessment was very broad. We didn't name any particular clinical assessment. And really, the definition says it's any valid test of clinical competence, essentially. So all exams that are out there that states are using for licensure would satisfy this requirement, whether it's the DLOSCI, whether it's a PGY1, whether it's the credits or ADEX exam, whatever is, all of those would satisfy this particular requirement of a clinical assessment. Number 4, implement procedures for conducting a criminal background check, have continuing professional development requirements for license renewal, and pay a participation fee. And this is on the state side. Okay, section 4 is what does the licensee have to have in place? So this is the requirements for the individual dentist, individual dental hygienist. Number 1, they've got to have a qualifying license, which again is a license that is active and unencumbered. Number 2, have passed the national board exam. Number 3, pre-doctoral CODA accredited dental education, and then CODA accredited dental hygiene education as well. Successful completion of the clinical assessment. Again, the compact is agnostic as to which one you satisfied, as long as you completed a clinical assessment. Meet any jurisprudence requirements established by the remote state. This is just if a state has a jurisprudence exam. Sometimes a state wants to make sure that you understand the Dental Practice Act when you're applying for a license. Not all states have these in place, some do. And so we just say that if a state has this in place, you need to satisfy that. Most of them are open book and take less than an hour to complete. And then pay applicable fees to the commission and to the remote state. Everybody always asks about the fees, and from our perspective, CSG, we would prefer the commission to set up the fee structure in terms of what it's going to cost people to actually participate, rather than CSG dictate what that specific number is in the compact. We feel like it's best left to the commission rulemaking process to set up the fee structure. I will say typically with other licensure compacts, the fee is quite a bit less than a license fee. So the PT compact, they set their privilege fee at $45. So if you want to work in 5 other states, it would be 45 times 5 would be your fee to access to get a privilege in those 5 states. Okay, this might be a more relevant slide for the regulators, but I just wanted to point this out as well, because people always ask, how does this protect the public? How does, how are bad actors caught? And how does discipline work in terms of the compact? So this is just a scenario here. Practitioner violates the Practice Act in their state of licensure. So let's say, again, the example I gave previously, I'm licensed in Kentucky. Let's say I violate the Kentucky Dental Practice Act and my Kentucky license is now encumbered. I automatically lose all of my compact privileges because I no longer have a qualifying license. My license is no longer active and unencumbered. So my ability to utilize compact privileges is suspended until my license is restored to good standing. Okay, what if somebody violates the Practice Act in a remote state? So that remote state will conduct the investigation. All that information will be shared to the other states via the compact data system, and they'll be able to take reciprocal action if they felt like the violation was particularly egregious. So if somebody's privilege was revoked in another state, other states would have the opportunity to revoke their privilege as well and keep that person from practicing in their state, as well as the state that has issued the qualifying license. So they can essentially use that information provided by the remote state and use it as if that action took place in their own state. So that's how discipline works under the compact. And so there's really no scenario where a bad actor could go undetected because of the amount of information sharing amongst the member states and the shared data system that they're all feeding information into. Okay, just a brief summary of the other sections in the compact. So there's the establishment of the commission, which again is just that governing body that administers the compact. We have a section on the data system, which outlines the type of information that will be in the data system. Commission rulemaking, oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement. Because this is a legal contract between states, there's provisions in there around, what if a particular state is not holding up their end of the bargain? How do the other states engage in a dispute resolution process to bring that state back into compliance? The effective date. So I mentioned this previously, but the compact will come into effect when it's enacted by the 7th state. Right now we have 2 states. We have legislation in 4 other states, with probably 3 or 4 additional states expected to introduce in 2023. So it would be very optimistic of me to say that I believe we would get 7 states this year. I think we'll get close. I think we probably will get 5 or 6. But certainly next year we'll hit that 7-state threshold, and this compact will officially go into effect. Construction or severability, just as with any other legal agreement, it can be collectively severed. And then lastly, the binding effect of compacts and other laws. This just says that if there's any kind of conflict between the compact and your existing state law, that the compact would supersede that conflict. This is very rare. People hear that and get worried that their Dental Practice Act is going to be superseded by the compact, but there's nothing in the compact that would conflict with a scope of practice or licensing requirements. So it's very rare that there would ever be a conflict between the compact and existing state law. Okay, just briefly want to talk about the benefits. Obviously, primary benefit we're talking about here is giving practitioners the ability to practice in multiple states, and obviously making it much easier when they relocate or move. Making it easier for practitioners to expand their market share to new markets where maybe they did not previously had access to because they were unable to get licensed there. Improves continuity of care when patients or providers relocate. We always make this point around, particularly with the mental health professions, we're able to see people electronically. And I know teledentistry is something that's new and emerging, and could be very useful for, the compact could be very useful for teledentistry moving forward. I mentioned supporting military families who are highly mobile, and then reducing the financial cost of maintaining multiple licenses. Again, you're no longer required to pay individual license fees, individual renewal fees, and you're not having to do CEs for multiple states. You only have to complete continuing education for the state where you have a license. There's no CE required for remote states where you have a privilege, and so you're having to spend less money on continuing education as well. We think there's benefits for the regulators, reducing the administrative burden. You're not having to process as many out-of-state applications, facilitating practitioner mobility during public health emergencies, and increasing collaboration, cooperation amongst member state regulatory boards. And then lastly, legislators, states like these as a workforce development tool to fill shortage areas. I know there's a lot being said right now about shortages in oral health, particularly on the hygiene side. And so we feel like the compact is one tool that states can use. We're not saying the compact is a fix-all for workforce shortages in oral health, but it is one lever that states can pull to try to attract more people into their state to fix some of these shortages. Okay, here's a little map of where we're at currently. Dr. Feldman mentioned the states who have enacted, or I think it was Philip at the beginning mentioned, Iowa and Washington are two states that have enacted, and we have pending legislation in Minnesota, Kansas, Texas, Tennessee, and Ohio. Tennessee is on the governor's desk. Texas has passed the House. We're in the Senate right now. Ohio is still in Senate committee, but that's Ohio is also very promising. Lots of support there for the compact in Ohio. Okay, so how can ADEA members get involved? Feel free to reach out to CSG directly if you want to engage with us on the compact. Would encourage you to reach out to your state dental association. Many times the state dental association is taking lead on getting the compact introduced in the state. Either the dental associations or the DSOs in the state are kind of the ones really pushing the bill. So if you want to get involved in the advocacy or lobbying efforts in your state, I think that's a great avenue to explore. Reaching out to your representatives in the legislature directly, sending them a letter or just trying to call them on the phone and talk to them about the compact. I think that is a great option to explore. And then lastly, and Dr. Feldman gave a great overview of the coalition, but if your school isn't already a member of the Coalition for Modernization of Dental Licensure, I think becoming a member would be a great way to also advocate for the compact. A lot of times, or our plan moving forward is to utilize the coalition to do a lot of advocacy in the states around the compact. And the compact is, as Dr. Feldman shared, one of the core issues that the coalition is focused on. Okay, next steps, like I mentioned, the compact is out to the states for enactment. Here's our website if you want to stay up to date on who is joining the compact. There's a lot of great educational resources on there for you that I would encourage you to utilize. We've got FAQs, we have one pager on the compact, we've got a detailed section by section summary, videos explaining the compact. So would encourage you to check out our website, and there's a lot of great educational tools on there for you. And there's my contact information, my email. We also have a general email inbox, dentalcompact@csg.org. So with that, I will conclude and we'll start taking questions.
Thank you so much, Matt and Dr. Feldman. If you have questions, if you could please enter those in the chat and I will read those to our presenters. We do have one question that came up. Someone was interested in hearing more about the geographic variation that you discussed on the map earlier.
Sure, and I think one of the key things with that geographic variation are states who have a goal of being very military friendly. If you notice, a lot of the southeastern, midwestern states that probably would be characterized as more right-leaning, more often are friendlier to these compacts because of the benefits that they provide to the military. DoD really has supported these compacts and getting them passed in the legislature, and they prefer compacts as their primary tool for facilitating military spouse licensure portability. So that's a big driver, states wanting to be more military friendly and realizing that passing these compacts is something that the DoD really cares about.
Thanks, Matt. Another question that we have is, are states resisting because they may lose income from state licensure fees?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And our experience with other compacts has been that the revenue loss has really not materialized in terms of states having a revenue loss because they're not getting as many out-of-state licensure fees. I think one of the reasons for that is that you're still able to apply for a compact privilege, so you're getting some fees back from that. Also, you might be getting people applying for privileges who maybe knew that they were never going to get licensed in your state because they didn't qualify. So maybe you're accessing more people than you were previously under the current licensure system. So we haven't really seen this materialize in terms of a legitimate fear. And what we always tell states who bring this concern to us is talk to the boards that have implemented these compacts in your state already. And I think the story they would tell you is that the revenue loss issue is it's very minimal, if anything at all.
Thanks, Matt. We have a question about the Texas legislation specifically. The Texas House amended the compact's language, and the question is, who decides if the past language is similar enough to qualify?
Great question. So that's one of CSG's roles. We essentially house the model legislation, and immediately when a bill is introduced, we compare it to the model and work with our attorneys to determine whether or not there are material deviations. So what happened in Texas is they got the compact introduced before the filing deadline, several months before we even finished the compact, just to kind of get it in the hopper. And then they amended it on the House side with the final compact language that we finalized in January. So that's what happened in Texas. We've reviewed the language and there's no issues. So CSG, that's our primary role, is ensuring the integrity of the language.
Thanks for that. We have another question that might be best for Dr. Feldman. And that is, what impact might the compact have on dental education overall?
I think more than the issue of the compact is the issue with regard to what states consider to be an acceptable proof of clinical competence. So getting at that clinical examination. That's likely to have a more significant impact on dental education than the compact, because the compact, the language that's been proposed for the compact is very broad, and it allows for a lot of flexibility. So I think that what states, how they interpret and how they consider that evidence for clinical competence, I think, is the bigger issue in terms of what's going to impact dental education.
Thank you, Dr. Feldman. And it looks like we have one more question, and it looks like a follow-up to, we have two more actually, and it looks like a follow-up to the question about licensure fees. And that's the state boards seem to resist these types of changes due to fears of losing control. Is that a real factor that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's absolutely a real factor. I think, dental boards who really want to know the reality about the compact and aren't there's a lot of fear mongering out there and a lot of misconceptions and rumors about the compact, and I think a hesitation to really embrace this in the dental regulatory community. But I think when you really look at what the compact is doing, the board's not really losing any control. They still have complete control over the practice that occurs within their state borders, are still able to discipline everybody who is practicing in their state in the same way as if they held a license, even if they were using the compact. They still have control over their Dental Practice Act. They still have control over licensure requirements. So in reality, there's very little that they are losing by joining the compact. But like I said, there's a lot of kind of fear and misconception about what the compact does and doesn't do. The only thing that you are kind of giving up a little bit in terms of by joining the compact is the ability to act in a unilateral manner. So, and what I mean by that is by joining the compact, you're essentially saying if you meet X, Y, and Z requirements, you're good to practice in our state. And so, what a state can't do is say, okay, you've met these requirements, but I still don't like, this particular thing on your application, so we're going to deny your privilege. They can't do that. If they've joined the compact and the practitioner from another state has met all the requirements in the compact, they have to let them practice. And so that's the only thing that the board essentially is losing, is that ability for kind of autonomous decision making about who's practicing in their state. By joining the compact, you're essentially signing up to saying another state licensing somebody is good enough for them to practice in my state if they've met these requirements around examination, education, and things like that. So that's a concern. We haven't really seen it be a big enough concern to cause problems in the legislature.
Thanks, Matt. And our next question is about international students. This may be more of a question for Dr. Feldman, but I'll open it to both of you.
Yeah.
How will this impact international students, or will it impact international students, if at all?
So the impact is about U.S. jurisdictions, not about international jurisdictions. So Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it has any impact on those that are trained internationally and want to stay practicing internationally, right? For those that are coming to the United States, there's going to be a lot of nuances. I mean, so right now the language requires that they have I think a U.S. DMD or DDS degree, if I'm not mistaken. Which means that if you've got an internationally trained individual who's been licensed in a state because they completed a PGY-1 program, or actually for the international ones, I believe that it may even need to be a specialty program, you would not be eligible to get a compact privilege because you don't meet the basic requirements of the requirements for being eligible to participate in the compact privileging. So in that way, it could impact international students. International students who get a DMD or DDS degree in the international program, well, they would be eligible to be privileged through a compact. So it's really going to be very specific to the individual, the kind of program that they're in, and what state their initial license is in.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is we do specify CODA accredited, and I know this is a little bit out of my depth, but I do understand there is some reciprocity with Canada around, I think they accredit some Canadian dental schools.
Yeah, so there is reciprocity between the Canadian accreditation and the U.S. Accreditation. So if you graduate with a DMD degree from a Canadian school, it is recognized in the U.S. To make things a little bit more complicated is that we do have our first international school that has been accredited by CODA. So King Abdul Aziz University, their dental school, is accredited by CODA. So we need to look at the specific language that's in the compact legislation, and I don't know what it is, with regard to whether or not it needs to be a U.S. accredited school in the U.S. Or whether or not it just needs to be accredited by CODA, and I don't know that answer offhand. Mm-hmm.
And that's something the commission would probably decide by rule.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you both. Our next question, does the legislation prohibit states from charging the same fee for compact privilege that they charge for licensure?
No, and that's one thing we always emphasize with these compacts is that states retain their sovereignty. So states retain the ability to set that fee at whatever they would like to. I think with the PT compact, my example I gave earlier, they encourage their member states to set it at $45, but I know some states exceed that. So the state retains that control to make that decision.
And it looks like we have one more question, and it's why can't those who are licensed outside of the International Dental Program be involved if one is licensed in another state?
So I'm not quite sure I understand what the question is.
I think it's referring to the requirement to have graduated from a CODA accredited program as opposed to another pathway to licensure for an international.
I can speak to that a little bit in terms of that particular provision. So the drafting team that we put together felt strongly that in order for a good number of states to get on board with the compact, CODA education would need to be kind of one of the core components, because that's one thing that all states agree on. Like every state requires CODA accredited education. There are alternative pathways for those internationally trained, but those have some variance. And so, one state might treat those dentists differently than another state. And we always emphasize that compacts thrive on uniformity, and where the uniformity was around this particular requirement was CODA. Every state requires CODA accredited education, but not every state has the same pathway for internationally trained dentists.
Yeah, actually, there's very few states that allow for licensure of internationally trained dentists who have not gone through a CODA approved program. Those that do allow licensure, it's generally those that have gone on to a specialty type program. And dental license cover the entire aspect of general dentistry. So there's a reluctance for that. And again, there's very few states that allow it. And a compact is about trying to involve as many states as possible.
Thank you both. It looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you both, Dr. Feldman and Matt. We really appreciate your time and educating us on this issue. And with that, we'll give everyone back 10 minutes of their day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.